Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 26. Space as Coexistence Axis. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase. One continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. We are ascending the final conceptual peaks of Ep.8, the pure abstract language. In part 25, we excavated time until we reached its barest skeleton. Time as sequence, the simple rule of before and after that orders the pages of reality. In this part 26, we turn to the companion of time, the dimension that makes the world wide instead of just long. We continue our exploration of book 8.7, Abstract Dimensionality with Space as Coexistence Axis. If time is the ordering of the pages, space is the width of the page itself. Time says, first this, then that. Space says, this and that together, at once. In this part, we strip away everything we habitually attach to space: meters, directions, shapes, distances, and uncover its pure role inside the language of phi. We will discover that space is not a container in which phi lives. It is the rule that allows phi to say more than one thing at a single moment. 26.1. The story core, the symphony score. Imagine a symphony orchestra preparing to play. In front of the conductor lies the full score. Along the horizontal direction of the page runs time, bar 1, bar 2, bar 3. This is the sequence axis we met in part 25. Move your finger from left to right, and you are moving through the before and after of the music. Now look vertically down the page. The violins have a staff. Just below, the violas. Below them, the cellos, the double basses, the flutes, the clarinets, the trumpets, the horns, all stacked in parallel. At a single instant of time, at one vertical slice through the score, many different musical lines exist together. The violins may play a trembling high note, while the cellos play a slow, deep pulse, and the oboes add a thin, singing tone above. This vertical stacking is a picture of space in its purest abstract form. Each staff is like a slot, in which part of the musical field can take on its value. The coexistence of these different values, all at the same moment in the sequence, is what we call spatial structure. The score does not tell you how many meters separate the violins from the cellos. It only tells you that their voices are distinct and simultaneous. In the language of phi, each complete configuration at a given time is not a single number. It is a pattern of values spread across many slots. These slots are the positions in abstract space. Space at this level is nothing more than the fact that phi can have one value here and a different value there at the same sequenced instant, the way different instruments can play different notes in the same beat. 26.2. The linguistic role, the grammar of and. In our language metaphor, time is the grammar of then, while space is the grammar of and. Time allows us to say, the cat sat, then the cat slept. Space allows us to say, the cat sat on the mat, and the lamp stood beside it, and the window was behind them. It is the rule that lets several descriptions live inside the same moment. Imagine a universe with time, but no space. At each step in the sequence axis, the universe could take on only a single number. The entire reality would be like a one-note melody played over and over, different notes in time, but never a chord. With space, a single moment can contain a whole chord of values, a whole scene of details, held together by the tiny word and. At this abstract level, the spatial axis does not yet carry a metric. It does not know about meters, angles, or volumes. That extra structure comes later, when we introduce spatial derivatives like k and quadratic measures like the length of a gradient. Right now, space is simply a set of distinguishable addresses, slot 1 and slot 2 and slot 3, all coexisting at the same value of the time index. It is the bare possibility of here and there being different while still belonging to the same now. 26.3. Scientific essence. What can be different yet simultaneous? The scientific question behind abstract space is very simple. What allows phi to be more than a single degree of freedom at a given moment? What allows there to be internal structure inside one instant of the universe? A field is the answer. Phi is a field, which means that it does not live on a single point. It is defined over a domain of labels. In part 25, we treated one of those labels as the time index, t, which orders different whole universe configurations in a line. The other label, or family of labels, we now call x. For each value of x, phi can take a possibly different value at the same t. The collection of all these x labels is what we call space. Think of a photograph. The whole photograph is one moment in time. But within that moment, each pixel can be light or dark, red or blue. The pixel coordinates, the x and y positions on the image, are the coexistence axis. The brightness values at those positions are the field values. Space, in this analogy, is the grid of pixels. The content of the photograph is the pattern of values drawn on that grid. We can now reinterpret our three echoes. In the time echo, we often turn coexistence into sequence. A scanner passes over a photograph line by line, reading each pixel value in time. Space is converted into a time series. The existence of a spatial axis is what makes this scanning meaningful. In the pure space echo, we have the grid itself. A chessboard with squares, a map with coordinates, a blank sheet ready to receive a drawing. This is space as a set of available positions, even before we place any particular values on them. In the motion echo, we see how coexistence patterns change along the sequence axis. If a bright spot moves from left to right across an image, the underlying axis of coexistence stays the same, but the values of phi at different x change over time. Motion is simply the rule that links one coexistence pattern to the next. At this level, we still have not assumed a particular shape for space. The set of x labels could form a line, a two-dimensional sheet, a three-dimensional volume, or an even stranger network. What matters for now is only that they form a collection of distinct, simultaneously addressable locations. 26.4. Position in the master tree, the branching canopy. In the master tree of Holophase, time as sequence is the trunk that climbs upward. Space as coexistence is what lets that trunk sprout branches and leaves. Without space, the tree of reality would be a thin vertical line, a history of single values one after another. With space, each level of the trunk can expand sideways into a whole canopy of possibilities. At a fixed moment on the time axis, we can imagine slicing horizontally through the tree. What we see in that slice is the spatial pattern of phi. Dense clusters of branches here, gaps there, certain directions of growth that echo symmetry or break it. The spatial derivative k lives on these branches. It measures how phi changes as we move from one position in the canopy to a neighboring one. Higher-order spatial derivatives describe the curvature and twist of branches, and the way leaves cluster or disperse. In this image, the coexistence axis is not an optional extra. It is what allows the tree to be a tree rather than a single stalk. It is what allows the universe to have interior structure at each step of its story. 26.5. Relations to neighbors, the stage for distinctions. Space, as coexistence, sits in constant relation with all the other pieces of the language. With phi itself, space is the domain that turns phi into a field. It allows phi to encode rich pictures, not just single numbers. Without space, there could be no landscapes, no bodies, no patterns, only one-dimensional histories of simple quantities. With time, space forms the basic address system of events. An event is something that happens somewhere and somewhen. The somewhere is the spatial label x. The somewhen is the temporal label t. Together, they provide the coordinates tx at which we evaluate phi and its derivatives. With the spatial gradient k, space provides the ground on which k can even be defined. K is the rate of change of phi with respect to position. If there were no distinct positions, no coexistence axis, then there would be no sense in talking about change across space. All the imagery of slopes, hills, and valleys in a field relies on the existence of an underlying array of positions. With motion, space provides the across which that motion can occur. Motion is about how patterns shift in location as time sequences. A wave moving through water is a pattern in phi, moving from one spatial slot to another. A particle, in traditional language, is a localized feature of the field whose peak migrates across the coexistence domain as time goes on. With information, space allows for parallelism. A message can be written in a line of symbols, using time to scan, or as a whole two-dimensional pattern, using space to store and retrieve simultaneously. High-capacity memory devices use space aggressively, many bits stored side by side rather than one after another. With complexity, space offers the room needed for highly intricate structures at a single instant: brains, ecosystems, cities, galaxies. These are not primarily complex in time, but in spatial organization. They are specific arrangements of phi values across a coexistence domain. Seen this way, space is the stage on which distinctions become possible. It lets the universe have different rooms, different regions, different neighborhoods within a single frame of time. 26.6. Semantic meaning, the work of structure and relationship. What is the semantic role of abstract space in the story of reality? It is the maker of structure and relationship. Space turns undifferentiated being into patterned being. It lets things stand next to each other, surround each other, support or oppose each other. Consider a simple example: a line of 3 lights, all on at once. The central light might be slightly brighter. That tiny asymmetry is already a spatial message. Perhaps start here, or this one is special. The arrangement of lights in space carries meaning that cannot be reduced to a single number. It is the pattern of coexistence that matters. Interior and exterior are also born from space. A circle drawn on a page divides the page into an inside and an outside. Once the space axis exists, we can talk about boundaries, regions, and interfaces. These concepts become central later when we discuss topological defects, horizons, and surfaces in physics, but their seed is this simple idea: multiple points and the relation among them. Parallelism is another gift of space. You can stir soup with one hand while turning a page with the other and listening to music at the same time. 3 streams of activity coexist. They have different locations in your body and different channels in your brain, but they share the same time index. Space allows your life to be full of overlapping processes rather than a single thin chain of actions. In the language of phi, space lets phi speak chords instead of single notes. It lets phi say, here is this value, and beside it is that value, and between them is a gradient, and enclosing both is a boundary. This is not yet geometry. It is the raw power to form simultaneous relationships. 26.7. Stability and falsifiability. Does coexistence really underlie space? The Holophase claim about space is bold. Everything we call spatial in physics, positions, distances, shapes, volumes, should ultimately be expressible as facts about which values of phi coexist at a given time and how they are related as neighbors in the domain of X. To test this, we look at phenomena that put space under pressure. Interference experiments with light and matter are one example. Two slits, separated in space, produce an interference pattern on a screen. Our phi description says, at a given time, the field at the screen is influenced by the coexistence of two distinct source regions. The pattern arises from the phase relationship between contributions from here and there in the coexistence axis. If our model cannot reproduce the observed fringes by treating position as a label on a field, then our picture of space is incomplete. Entanglement raises deeper questions. Two particles, far apart in laboratory space, can show correlations that cannot be explained by any local story with hidden variables. Yet, in standard quantum field theory, these correlations are still encoded in field states defined over a spatial domain. If future experiments or theories show that some influences or correlations truly cannot be embedded in any field over any coexistence domain, then space as a field domain is not enough. Something more global would be needed. Quantum gravity brings another challenge. Some approaches suggest that space itself may be discrete or emergent, built from more fundamental combinatorial data. In that case, our abstract continuous axis X would be an approximation. The deeper coexistence relation might be a network of nodes and links rather than a smooth continuum. The holophase framework could survive this, but only if we are willing to reinterpret X as label on a node in a graph rather than coordinate in a continuum. The key falsification would be a clear, repeatable physical effect that stubbornly refuses to be described in terms of simultaneous values of some field, however abstract, defined on a domain of distinguishable positions. If such an effect is proven, then space cannot be fully reduced to coexistence in phi. Our tale of space would be, at best, a powerful approximation. 26.8 Examples across scales, coexistence everywhere. To make this vivid and friendly, let us walk through examples where the idea of coexistence is obvious and intuitive. Look at a night sky. The stars are not presented to you one at a time in sequence. They appear together as a dome of light. Each star occupies its own region in your visual field. This is pure spatial coexistence. The particular pattern, constellations, gaps, clusters, is the structure written by phi across the coexistence axis of your perception. Consider a forest. Trees, rocks, streams, and animals are all present in the same broad moment. You could walk for hours among them, but your single glance already takes in a cross-section of coexistence. That tree here, that hill there, that bird crossing that gap of sky. The richness of the scene is not primarily in time. It is in how many different things stand alongside one another. Think of a city map. It represents roads, buildings, parks, and rivers as shapes on a flat sheet. That sheet is a model of the coexistence axis. What matters is how locations connect, which blocks touch, where the bridges link neighborhoods. The distances are useful, but the basic spatial information is this place and that place both exist within the same overall layout. Inside your body, space is just as central. Different organs occupy different regions. The spatial arrangement of cells within an organ and of organ systems within the whole body is crucial for function. Your brain itself uses spatial maps to organize sensory input and motor control. There are regions devoted to your fingers, your lips, your legs, all coexisting in the cortical sheet. Even in digital technology, space shows up as coexistence. The pixels on your screen all hold their colors at once. The memory cells in a chip all retain their bits together. A photograph, a video frame, a diagram, all are spatial arrangements of information, stored side by side, not one after another. 26.9 Recognition skill. Seeing the array in daily life. To sharpen your perception of space as coexistence, you can practice a simple habit. Whenever you look at something, gently shift your attention from what is happening to what is present together. When you listen to music, notice not only the sequence of notes, but the harmony, how several notes sound at the same time, forming a chord. That harmony is space in the domain of pitch, a kind of coexistence along a different axis. When you walk into a room, pause and sense how many different things are present in one glance. Surfaces, objects, shadows, colors. Do not follow a single object story. Feel the whole field as one simultaneous arrangement. When you read a page of text, observe that the entire page is physically present at once. Your eyes move across it in time, but the letters and words coexist. You could, in principle, look anywhere at any moment. The spatial layout is what makes diagrams, tables, and paragraphs meaningful as structures, and not just as sequences of characters. Even in your inner life, there is a sense of coexistence. You can be aware of your breath, the weight of your body, and a thought passing through your mind all at once. Different aspects of experience share the same now. That layered richness is an echo of the coexistence axis inside consciousness. 26.10 Return to phi, the field of togetherness. We arrive again at our starting point. One field, phi, and its derivatives. Time, in part 25, emerged as the way phi's different states can be arranged in a meaningful sequence. Space, in this part 26, emerges as the way phi's values can be diversified within a single sequenced moment. Phi does not float inside space like paint inside a jar. Rather, by being expressible as a function over many positions, phi gives birth to the very idea of a somewhere and a somewhere else. Coexistence is a property of phi's expressive capacity. Space, in this abstract sense, is the name we give to the pattern of simultaneous difference in the field. When later we speak of distances, angles, curvature, and geometry, we will be adding structure to this axis. Ways of measuring how far apart positions are and how phi bends between them. Those added structures live in K and its higher derivatives, and in the quadratic and topological forms we have already begun to explore. But the root of all of that is simple. There is more than one slot for phi to speak in at a time. If you wish to see the full mathematical formalism behind this, how a spatial domain, with its topology and possible geometries, arises from viewing phi as a section over a base manifold, you can look to the technical Holophase papers on Zenodo. There, these ideas are developed with the precision of differential geometry. Here, in the audio language, we are staying with the intuitive heart. Space has the power of phi to sing many notes in the same beat, holding the whole picture of the language. Before we close this part, let us briefly climb above the details and look at where we are in the larger journey of the Holophase language. It is easy, as we go deeper, to lose sight of the simple overall picture, so I will always try to bring us back to it. At the very root, there is only phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement. From phi's first differentiation, three fundamental shadows appear at once: time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative of phi asks a more refined question about how this movement is changing, and each new derivative also throws these three shadows together: a time echo, a space echo, and a motion echo. From this endless hierarchy of derivatives and echoes, all the structures of reality emerge. Episode 8 has been our exploration of this as a pure abstract language, before we tie it to any specific physical implementation. We treated phi as an alphabet, its derivatives as grammar, its stable patterns and topological features as words, its relations as meanings, its constraints as information, its depth of description as complexity, its path dependence as memory, and its ability to transform information by rule as computation. Step by step, we discovered that a single oscillatory field can, in principle, carry everything we expect from a language: expression, structure, semantics, storage, and processing. Now, in Book 8.7, we are turning to the dimensional skeleton that this language naturally carries inside it. In Part 25, we saw that time, at this abstract level, is simply the sequence axis, the rule that orders possible configurations of phi into before and after. In this Part 26, we have seen that space, just as abstractly, is the coexistence axis, the rule that allows many different values of phi to stand together within each step of that sequence. This means that even without invoking any specific physics, no particular forces, no specific particles, no chosen units, the holophase language already contains something that looks very much like the space and time we experience. Time appears whenever we think in terms of first this, then that. Space appears whenever we think in terms of this and that together, arranged in some pattern. Both are expressions of how phi can vary, along the sequence of its stories and across the spread of its simultaneous voices. As we move on to the final part of Book 8.7, we will introduce the third axis that completes this triad: motion as transformation. Motion will show us how the language links then with there, how patterns in phi can travel and interact across the coexistence domain as time sequences them. With that, our picture of abstract dimensionality, time, space, and motion, will stand as a completed, purely linguistic structure inside the holophase framework. For now, it is enough to let this sink in gently. Whenever you notice that many things are present at once, arranged in a way that matters, you are seeing the coexistence axis in action. Whenever you notice that those arrangements change from one moment to the next, you are watching phi trace its story along the sequence axis. And behind both, if the holophase picture is correct, there is only one continuous cyclic field, endlessly echoing through all its derivatives to create the worlds we know. As you listen to these episodes, you do not need to hold every technical detail in your mind. What matters most is the feeling of the whole. One field, many derivatives, three fundamental shadows, and the gradual unfolding of a complete language of reality. Each part of Episode 8 has been one small facet of that language. Here in Part 26, we have given a name and a shape to something you have always lived inside: the quiet fact that things can stand side by side, forming patterns at a single glance. That side by side is what we are calling space. It is phi's way of letting the universe be rich in a single moment, not only across a long history of time. Salam, and peace be upon you.